Hi, welcome to Relish Books. So, Harry Potter Order of the Phoenix, book 5 in the Harry Potter series. When I was reading these books for the first time, I was burning through them, couldn't read them fast enough, and then I hit book 5 and I put it aside and didn't finish it for a long time because of Dolores Umbridge. There has probably never been a more infuriating villain in a book that I've ever read, and I think a lot of people would agree. Rereading it, I was surprised at how little she was actually in it, because remembering it from before, it seemed like she was just dominating the whole thing. And obviously she is a very strong presence and influence through the book, but like the horrible scenes with her, I remember them just being all through it, and it wasn't actually that bad. I was able to get through it this time just fine, but that first time it was rough. And the book is rough in a lot of other areas. This is simultaneously one of the best and worst in the series, I think. It's the darkest, most depressing. I think even more than the Deathly Hallows, this one is just a downer on pretty much every level, which, again, I think is actually one of its strengths if you look at the overarching plot of the entire series. Rowling does such a good job of balancing the lighter books and the darker books. Particularly, I think, with 5. 4 is very exciting. There's a lot of dark stuff kind of building, but it doesn't really break until the very end. And then book 5 is just, you're just like in this dark fog the whole time. And I think that's very purposeful because Harry's in such a dark fog and such a terrible mood the entire book. And then she balances that so well, though, because then book 6, even though, the wizarding world is openly at war with Voldemort now, basically, everybody knows about it, it's out in the open, and you think things would be really dark and depressing, but it's actually much more lighthearted and fun. In that book, you get into it's a fairly normal year at school compared to like the last two. There's a lot of the young romances really happening in book 6. So yeah, just a great balance. But book 5, I really enjoy all the stuff to do with the Order. Like, that's very exciting, and it's unique in that way, even though the Order of the Phoenix continues to exist throughout the rest of the series and be talked about. There's no more of this like secret meetings at headquarters and stuff, which is fun and exciting. And it's sad that that's not really continued, because it feels very cool. But yeah, you also have this like just this nasty kind of atmosphere with headquarters being Sirius's really terrible old house, and Sirius is just dark mood. Harry's dark mood because he's feeling Voldemort's emotions throughout the book, on top of just being he's a young teenager and he's dealing with all this anger. Everyone's against him, plus he has Voldemort's thoughts. And that's probably the other most... So there's Umbridge, and then the other thing that makes the book pretty unpleasant for me is just how angry and short and nasty Harry is through the book. Because that's not really what he's like. He's a fairly nice person. He is, he's always rebellious and stuff. But in this book, he's so angry, and that causes him to just be really reckless, to be stupid, to not listen to other people. But at the same time, you're like frustrated with him for being that way. But you're also, if you put yourself in his place, I'm like, yeah, at the end of the book, Dumbledore talks about how he was mistaken not to have told him things. And I'm like, yeah, Dumbledore is so wise through the whole series. But that one, it's like, how dumb can you get? Like, leaving Harry alone like that. He talks about, like, forgetting what it's like to be young. And that's it's like, okay, it's kind of an excuse. But, like, if you imagine you're in Harry's place, the book starts where he's at Privet Drive. Cedric has died last term. He's gone back home, and he hasn't heard anything from anyone. No one's telling him anything. His friends are like, we can't tell you what's going on. He hasn't had word from anyone. Obviously, Dumbledore's trying to protect him, trying to keep him safe, trying to keep Voldemort from figuring out about the link between him and Harry, whatever. But it's still pretty obvious when you see Harry's attitude and what he's feeling that that was the worst possible choice. And he's very annoying, and I get angry at him when he's just losing his mind, getting so angry all the time at his friends who are trying to support him. But at the same time, I get it. Like, if I was in that situation, I would be super, super angry too. But it just makes for kind of a downer of a book. There's by far the most all caps in the book. It feels like every time Harry's talking, he's just shouting his head off. It gets old. Yeah, all the stuff with Umbridge, you couldn't have a more annoying, awful, just horrible, horrible person. And it's like, yeah, it's like, how is this being allowed? It's so bad. But there's also there's some fun things happening. One of the best moments in the entire series is when Fred and George leave school. It's a really glorious moment. And I really like, too, something I was thinking about reading the series again. Fred and George are some of the most beloved characters. They're so funny and so great. Everyone loves them. And it's such a good balance. She has such a good variety of characters. Because, you have Hermione, who all she cares about is, or top of her priorities, is a good education. Learning as much as she possibly can. Education means everything to her. And then you have, like, this dynamic with Percy Weasley, who was very, very ambitious, and he became very proud and terrible, and his mother's always holding him up as an example to the other kids, talking about how they need to be like that. She's very proud because he has a job in the ministry, but then he turns out to be an awful person. And then there's Fred and George. That's kind of this, she has such a good balance of different personalities and people following different paths, because kind of this balance of, like, education is very important to some people, but it's not the most important thing in the world, and it shouldn't be elevated and worshipped, and that's just, higher education is just not the path for some people, not the path that they want, and it shouldn't be forced on them. They shouldn't be pressured into that. And you see that with Fred and George, how they are brilliant, but they aren't interested in a higher education. They have a plan for the business that they're going to do. And, Mrs. Weasley is very disappointed in them and is always telling them that they won't be anything if they don't get this higher education, and she doesn't approve of their joke shop. And then you see them launch into that over the course of the next couple books and be very successful at it. And you see her kind of being like, well, I wasn't a fan of the idea, but they're really good at it. And so I just like that balance, how she has some characters to whom it's, like, super, super important, and some characters who that's just not the path they're going to take. And I appreciate that, because I feel like in our culture, in our modern culture, there's such a huge, huge push for, in TV shows and stuff especially, and movies, there's this idea of, like, higher education being just absolutely everything and the most important thing in the world, and you can't amount to anything if you don't have it. And that's simply not true. And to have, like I said, just a good balance. And I don't know how intentional that was on her part, and it's something that I was really only thinking about on this read through, but I just appreciate that balance. Another thing that happens in book 5, of course, is the DA meetings where Harry is teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts. That's really fun. I wish that there was more chapters exploring that. The kind of the snippets that you get of it are really enjoyable, and I wish that there could have been kind of less content on some of the more depressing things and a little more in-depth chapters about what goes on at the DA meetings, because those are really great. And then there's Harry's relationship with Cho Chang, which is awful, but again, very real. She's very accurate. It's very it's very accurate on how, they're 15. I think she's a year older, so she's like 16 maybe in this one. And kind of that reality of when you're that young, of, having this crush on someone, feeling super excited whenever you see them, and then kind of realizing the reality of like, oh, we're going to go out together. It's actually, it's more fun when it's this impossible dream, and then there's this huge excitement when they talk to you. Every little exchange is so huge and so important, but then they actually go out together and it's kind of like, now what? Like, what did I actually want from this? Like, when you're that young and having a big crush like that, you're not actually thinking about a real relationship. And kind of just the reality of that, and how Harry's first romance is a fiasco and ends terribly. And just how they weren't, it just feels really real how they just were not right for each other. She was incredibly immature, and Harry didn't know anything about girls. So yeah, that's uncomfortable, but again, very realistic. The disappointing thing about that, and I'll talk about this more, especially in the next video, but the disappointing thing is, like, I don't like Harry with Cho, but probably the one major character and major relationship that doesn't work for me in the books, because Rowling's so good at all the different characters, all the different relationships, they work so well. I have never liked Harry and Ginny. I just don't like Ginny's character. She doesn't really work. She's kind of an awkward character. It doesn't feel natural to me. Obviously, it's convenient that Harry's going to get with her. It's the sister of his best friend. The Weasleys are basically his family already, and then he's going to be like connected to them. And there's groundwork laid for them from the very first book. But I just, especially in book 6, their relationship doesn't do it for me. I wish Harry had gotten with someone random. Maybe not random, but someone that you just like knew a little bit throughout the series, maybe. Someone he just kind of noticed every once in a while, and then maybe like at the end of book 7, it's like, oh, and Harry got with this person. I would have liked that more. Because, yeah, Ginny is, she's kind of terrible. Anyway, that's for the next book. But, yeah, Harry and Cho, that's kind of the relationship of book 5. Doesn't work out. So kind of yet another really stressful thing in Harry's life, and a disappointment, and just another not cheerful thing going on. But this book does have a good ending. Obviously, it's very sad in some ways, but I really, really like the battle at the Ministry. I love that group of characters together. You throw in Neville and Luna with the usual guys, and that's really fun. This is the first book where Luna is really introduced. And she's a fun character. One of the only characters in the whole series. There are a few, but she's one of the main ones where I actually like her better in the movies than in the books. Her actress was just really great. Yeah, there's a couple. Not very many, but a couple. Neville is really great in the movies. I probably like him as much as in the books, but I love him in the books too. So yeah, I really like that they put those two in there, and I just enjoy the chapter of the Ministry. You're seeing all these kind of interesting things, hints at different kinds of magic that you had never heard about before, that never really get explored a lot further. There's also a moment, the whole complaint back in book 3 about the time turners. There's a small detail in book 5 that doesn't really fix the loophole, because you're like, well, I'm sure great wizards would be able to, if there's such a thing as time turners, wizards as powerful as like Dumbledore and Voldemort would probably be able to mess with time without time turners, or at least would have them tucked away somewhere, even though they're supposed to be regulated by the Ministry. But there is a moment where they smash. There's like a case full of time turners and they break them all. So then there's a mention in book 6 of like, well, we can't use time turners. They're all broken. So that's just kind of a funny detail. But yeah, so they see all kinds of interesting things, and it's like, very, what's the word? There's the rising action, the rising tension in this climax, but it's also just a fun chapter as they're going through the Ministry. I think Harry Potter always has really, really great climaxes. I feel like they're never a letdown, because obviously going through the book, you know that there's going to be some big climax at the end, but they never are anticlimactic. They're always very fulfilling. So, yeah, overall, even though it's unpleasant in a lot of ways, it's still a really good book. And yeah, once you've made it through that one, you can make it the rest of the way, no problem. So, those are my thoughts on Harry Potter Order of the Phoenix. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.